What's up, Wesley?
Welcome back to the Charleston Wesley podcast, where we make ministry available on the go. I'm Ava, and I'm the Wesley Worship Intern.
And I'm John, and I'm serving as the director of the Wesley Foundation. And we have a very special guest joining us this afternoon, this evening. It's kind of in that in-between time for us right now. It's our very own Brendan Cerling. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm well.
That's good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the West Coast, other side of the continent, originally from Los Angeles. And for the last 2 years, I've been a part of Wesley as I've been studying at the American College of the Building Arts. And I am excited to start next year as the outreach intern. So, Good stuff.
What will you be doing as the outreach intern?
I'm basically responsible for all the fun stuff is how I describe it to people.
That's cool.
Yeah, just hanging out, coordinating events.
That's cool.
Yeah, making sure everybody's having a good time.
I say that's cool as if I didn't plan that position to be this way, but
or do that position yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I've been known from time to time to have a good time. How do you just? I know this could be a longer episode topic, but briefly, how did you find Wesley?
Literally Google is the short answer. I was super lonely my freshman year of college.
Let's go.
And I'd tried a whole bunch of church groups, and they were just not it at all. And I just literally looked up college ministry groups. Wesley's website came up, and I saw that they got down with service and fellowship, and those things seemed really cool to me. And so I emailed John and was like, hey.
Fun fact, on the first night that Brendan visited us, it was his birthday, which is very sweet. And then I also pointed out that he could be an axe murderer. And apparently that's what made him stick.
That wasn't actually even just my first night. That was like right when I walked in the room too. And there was like a whole bunch of like not smiling faces looking at me.
Listen, man, you never know. That's how axe murderers work, you know?
That's true.
You never know who's going to come. Anyway, how are you doing, Ava? You're awfully quiet over there.
Sorry, I'm just taking it all in. I'm doing good. I'm ready for this. I think we got a good group going, so I'm excited for tonight.
It's good.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm getting a little sleepy, but I'm hopefully getting energized by talking about a super cool topic called boredom, which is a weird topic in general to talk about. Like, I don't think you're going to hear many sermons about this in church. There's also not like some worship songs about overcoming the trial of boredom or whatever it is. You know, it's just something we don't talk about very much. And even diving into the scripture, I was struggling with it. But we're going to try and unpack the topic of boredom today. And one of the reasons that we felt that we should record this episode now is because I think the summer as a college student is ripe with boredom. Would y'all agree with that?
I would, yeah.
At times, yeah.
At times?
I think less so than when I was a kid, but definitely it's still there.
Yeah, I remember as a kid being like super bored over the summer when I was young, and then when it was like middle and high school, loved summers. Mm-hmm. But then in college, I found myself being very bored. I think it is a distinct challenge this time of year for a lot of people, but it's a distinct challenge that comes up throughout our lives, and so hopefully we're going to unpack it a little bit and also talk about how our response should be to boredom and all that good stuff. And so the first question I have for both of y'all, neither of y'all grew up in Charleston. It was a new place for you. I mean, Ava was down the road. You were on the other side of the country. But is there a unique challenge with boredom in Charleston?
I think like coming from, like you said, the other side of the country, especially like my freshman year, I've spent a summer here, but I was working, and so I wasn't too bored. But what I really found to be boring was fall of my freshman year, and that was where I experienced a lot of boredom. And yeah, I did find it really boring, and a part of that was because, like, A, I'm a college student, I've got no money, but also B, I had no car at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of, like, stranded on the peninsula, and I just didn't feel like there was a whole lot of things to do. In my school, we talk a lot about history and the history of Charleston. So going to like some of the sites wasn't super interesting to me at that time. And I also just didn't really have any friends that were out here. So I think it definitely can be, if you don't have a car, you don't have money, things like that. But as I've kind of lived here, I've slowly discovered that there's actually a pretty good amount of stuff to do, especially in summer.
Yeah, I'm from like a tourist city in a way too. Like, so I've never really been in a place where it's just like nothing to do, and I think I've always been grateful for that. But at the same time, a hard part about Charleston is knowing there's fun things to do, but not being able to have like the means or the car or whatever to do it. You were talking about your fall semester. That was like a rough time for me without a car because I like felt like a rat in a cage. Like the few blocks of my campus were all I saw, and that's partially on me. I'm lazy and I didn't want to go on walks and stuff. But at the same time, there's all these cool areas to Charleston that's not exactly even downtown, but you can't walk all the way to West Ashley. Well, I'm sure you could, but I'm not going to do that. So, yeah, I think Charleston's unique because it's kind of like you see the fun stuff that you could be doing, but you can't always be actually doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think I kind of have I was talking with some people about how I think there's a factor of mental health when we come to Charleston, because whenever I tell people like, oh, I live in Charleston, they're like, oh my gosh, you must be so happy. I love coming to Charleston every summer. And for me, it's like, yeah, I mean, I like Charleston, but like it's super hot. The traffic is terrible. It monsooned for 3 days, like all these things. And so people can be like really shocked. And so I feel like there's extra pressure for us to be having fun in Charleston because everyone sees Charleston as that. But another thing that y'all both kind of brought up is I feel like isolation plays a role in boredom. Because freshman year is super, super lonely. Even if you're coming with like a bunch of friends that you know, and even when you like plug into a ministry group like Wesley from like the first get-go, it can still be a lonely experience. And so to your point, Ava, about how you didn't want to walk downtown or something like that, I think it's because you didn't want to be alone necessarily, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was something that kind of struck me. But I think Charleston's a great place. I have a lot of fun here. There's always something to do, but you got to have money to do a lot of stuff. You got to have a car. You also have to have the forethought of when to drive, because if you go to the beach at 4 p.m., good luck, you know. So there's all those dynamics that can kind of come up there. But boredom also, I feel like, comes up in... I feel like I have some semesters where I feel bored and some where I'm like really into the coursework. Have y'all had like a boring semester of school yet? Has that been every semester of school?
I think I've been bored in different ways. Like, I don't think I've ever been bored academically because I just like get way too consumed with grades. So I feel like I never have enough time with school, but socially, yeah, I've definitely felt bored. Especially, yeah, I mean, we've touched on freshman year, but yeah, both fall semesters though, even my sophomore year, coming back after not being there during the summer, I think was still like a little bit jarring. So yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how next year is if you've spent a summer here.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you don't have that break. But what about you?
Yeah, I definitely have had boring. I think this past year was pretty boring for me personally. My freshman year was like just a massive scramble to like just try and get everything in during final season, stuff like that. And then I was told at the end of freshman year that sophomore year was like going to get at least 50%, if not like 100% worse. And so me and all my friends and like classmates and stuff were kind of sitting throughout the year like waiting for stuff to get bad, and then like nothing really happened. And like,
which is almost worse.
Yeah, because like you know, like I could have worked a job, and spent my time. I would have spent my time differently if I had known that I would have had that free time, but I just was kind of gearing up for the worst. And so this past semester, I had one or two like semi-interesting classes, but there really wasn't a whole lot that really I felt like challenged me. And so that was actually a real struggle for me this past year, was like boredom and like trying to figure out how to on the fly constructively spend my time in a way that was enjoyable but not like self-destruct through like doom scrolling or whatever it might be.
Yeah, doom scrolling is what you called it?
Yeah, doom scrolling.
Wow, I had a professor who used to call it the zombie scroll.
Yeah, that works too. Brain rot is another
Yeah,
thing
dude,
I've
I
heard.
actually started using brain rot in my like vernacular. I've always loved learning, and so when I was in college, I felt like kind of like what Ava said, like academically, like I always found myself like enjoying my coursework, but also I was the type of person who just took a bunch of classes because I don't do well being still, and that's kind of on me. That's not necessarily a good thing, because I do think that when we talk about boredom, it's kind of our struggle with being still, right? It's this idea that we really struggle to just exist
100%.
without different things coming in. And the other thing with like boredom, and I'm kind of glad that Ava brought it up the way that you did with academically, you've never been bored, but socially you have. And so you've kind of made it clear that there's like, there's different arenas in our life that we can be bored in.
Yeah.
One of the things that like, and this is like very tragic, but with like boyfriend and girlfriends, sometimes they just get bored of each other, and that's a good time to call it quits, because it's like, oof, that's rough, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not a good sign. But you know, it can come up in that. It can come up in friendships. It can come up in like clubs. You know, someone's really on fire for the ultimate frisbee team, and then all of a sudden they're just like, I'm just not really interested in it anymore. And I just think that that's kind of part of it. However, there's also, I think, this trait where there's like boredom in our spiritual life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Have either of y'all ever had a season where you felt like bored spiritually? And if so, like, could you tell us a little bit about what that season looked like?
Yeah, I think, like, for me, I don't know, a year or just a good bit after I started taking my faith more seriously, you know, you have this really intense kind of on fire for Jesus period, or at least I did. And I was like, oh, yeah, like, I wake up and I'm ready to pray, and, like, I'm ready to, you know, just everything that I do, I'm trying to glorify God, and, you know, reading my Bible, and it's super interesting, super profound, things like that. But then there's kind of this period right after that where it starts to get slightly less exciting because maybe you've read it already before. And so, yeah, I feel like I've gone through multiple periods where I feel spiritually bored or not really challenged, or I feel like, I don't know, maybe in my arrogance I've kind of picked up all that I can from, you know, like the Bible or things like that. So yeah, I definitely have felt that. What about you, Ava?
I like that you brought up that, like, what we call that on fire feeling, because in high school, my story is kind of like, I think everyone when COVID hit went through a weird mental state, you know, in whatever way you did. But for me, I was like consumed with fear. Like I was just very, I want to say anxious, just a lot. And I would let a lot of what you know, you didn't have a lot of person connection, so a lot of your connection was through your phone and your social medias and whatever. And you were talking about doom scrolling. When you said that, I immediately thought you were talking about when, like, people will post about the end times,
Oh.
and I was like,
That was a
No,
weird
no.
season where everyone was like, "We are in the end times.
Well,
Prepare yourselves."
I was
Yeah,
already
facts.
not doing super great up there in the headspace, and getting it, like, you know, once you watch one video, it just pours in,
Yeah.
and I just got consumed by those videos, and literally out of fear, I got super on board with God very quick, and like
Interesting.
really dove into my
Interesting.
Bible. I would pray. I was like, it's actually probably the most disciplined I've ever been in my whole life.
Wow.
I'd actually agree, yeah.
Yeah, but then
Interesting.
eventually, you know, all that stuff kind of faded. You know, we've now, what are we, 5 years post COVID?
Well, 4.
Four.
4 or 5, 4. Okay,
Yeah.
well, but I like. I think when I'm not feeling those super strong emotions, yeah, I feel bored. Like, I don't know if it's bored or if I'm like, I think I said the word lazy earlier, but I would say I'm kind of lazy with my faith when I'm not feeling
Yeah.
those big emotions. And I think, yeah, I've definitely experienced boredom
Yeah.
during those times.
It's interesting that y'all said, so y'all both said that you were most disciplined in COVID.
Oh, 100%. I was like, that was like my period I talked about, like right before, like, I don't know, the dust settled or whatever, or my on fire for Jesus settled. Like my on fire for Jesus period was 100% COVID. I had just gotten broken up with. And like, I was just like,
Dude,
you know
that is a good way to turn to the Lord.
oh, 100%.
That is a good way to
100%.
turn to the Lord.
Yeah, I was like
Yeah.
playing Minecraft and listening to like all these like cool Jesus books that I'd never read before, and I was like, "This is awesome," you know.
What, Minecraft or the books?
Both.
Oh, okay.
This is like
Porque
peak
no
life.
los dos.
Yeah.
It's interesting that y'all said that like COVID, y'all were like super disciplined because COVID killed my spiritual discipline. Like I was most disciplined in college when I was y'all's age. Actually, my junior year, I had a very bad breakup, and then I just like boom jumped in and like got super disciplined. And then COVID happened, and all of it went away, which is so counterintuitive because that's when I had the most time on my hands. But like I said earlier, like I'm someone who likes to stay busy. And when the world slows down like that and I can't stay busy, whoo, man,
Yeah.
it was, dude, the brain rot was next level. And like I did a lot of neat things then. I had a lot of fun with my roommates, and that was when my now wife and I were dating, and so we would hang out a lot and play board games. I played a lot of video games, and when we say video games, a lot of people just assume that it's brain rot, but like I'm a big passion point that like there are some video games that have like really compelling stories. For example, The Last of Us, like one of the best storylines of all time, in my opinion.
Well, didn't they make a show out of it?
They did.
Yeah.
They did. Anyway, that was a tangent. But something that Brendan said that I wanted to circle back to is you said that you had this on fire feeling, and then it went down to a smolder, right? And you said something along the lines of like you weren't being challenged anymore, which is interesting because you used the same word to describe your school experience. What does being challenged in your faith life look like?
I think for me, I've been listening to a couple of podcasts lately, and one in particular that's really been challenging me. And it's like things that I like, it's like takes that I've never heard. Or this is the podcast, I should clarify, but like a lot of their podcast is like takes that I've never really heard before that I almost like want to disagree with. Because like they, like we've been saying, like it challenges the way I live my life and just how I go about my day. And so I think like new perspectives are something that are really, really fruitful for me.
Yeah.
We as Wesley just did a DC trip a couple weeks ago, and that was just like such a great experience for me because we talked about all these different aspects of faith. And, you know, like the Holocaust Museum is right there in DC, and like we went there, we talked about it, and it's like that's a really difficult thing to like reconcile with a good God. And so yeah, that kind of like just new perspective, figuring out, I don't know, these different angles, and how they're really challenging your own presumptions, what you'd already thought before. That's really what gets me like fired up, I guess.
I think like for me, I see like every day as kind of its own daily challenge for me personally with doubt. I think eventually we might talk about doubt on the podcast, but I get like intrusive thoughts, like intrusive doubt thoughts, not like the weird intrusive thoughts, like, well, we all know what weird intrusive thoughts could be, but like,
good save.
Good save. I don't want to get into what they all could be, but like, there's just some things in the Bible that are so unbelievable that it's hard to believe. And so I'll get a little voice be like, well, come on, was there really a big ark, or did the whale really eat Jonah? Like, these little questions, and they start to nibble a little bit at my brain. I think for me, I see like a daily challenge, because when I do struggle with doubt, I want to become bored with faith. I don't want to think about those complicated things. So honestly, it's not a good cycle.
So when we talk about challenges to I guess like challenges to our faith life, which kind of disrupt this boredom and spiritual boredom, right? Where do these challenges come from? Do they come from other people? Do they come from God? Or do they come from yourself?
I think for me, I think, I guess I'd say me. I mean, I know I just talked about like how it's through kind of community or like hearing other people's perspectives or whatever. Like those are the things that challenge me. But also, like, if you get bored, like, at the end of the day, I kind of feel like it's on me to, like, Charleston is a very interesting place historically, and, like, seeing how Charleston has, like, dealt with its history, how, like, there's a lot of, like, there's a lot of people whose parents, grandparents, whatever, like, were in slavery. And so there's, like, it's a really unique area because it's still kind of healing from that trauma, I guess. And so it's like those perspectives are out there, and like those people are out there, and it's kind of on me at the end of the day, I feel like, to go out and find those and just talk to those people and be challenged in that way.
Yeah.
For me, with the whole struggles with doubt, and that making me not bored, but me wanting to be bored because I don't want to deal with it. I think that, I mean, to be completely honest, it's mainly on me, but again, I'm on I know we've heard a lot of about TikTok and stuff like that, but I'm on those apps, and to be completely honest, TikTok's actually been good for me spiritually. I love the little 1 minute lessons that kind of I get a little bit of God sprinkled throughout my day, but then you also get random people arguing, I think they're called stitching, but when you make a video in response to another video, and that will also pop up on my feed, is people that aren't Christians expressing their opinions, which, honestly, it's good, I guess, for discussion and to make myself think, but it's mainly, I guess, from me, but sometimes from other people. Yeah. I let other people creep in.
Yeah, well, one bit of advice I'll offer y'all and everyone else that's listening is it's good to have someone in your life that will challenge you. One of the things that I am very proud to do for students, and I'm very proud that this is kind of the relationship I've cultivated with some students, is they know that I will tell them what I think, not necessarily what they need to hear. And I'm glad to serve in that way. But you want someone who can challenge you because you are dumb sometimes. like we are all dumb sometimes.
Real.
We just miss things, or we just are ignorant of something. And this is one of the things that I just praise my wife for being that person in my life, because I'm a super dumb dude, and she is so spiritually gifted at telling me that I'm being dumb. And that's a good thing. And so all that to say that y'all should find someone who calls you out and does challenge you to do things. But with all of that, I thought we'd transition a little bit in looking at some things biblically and kind of wrestling with this topic of boredom. So how would y'all define boredom? Like, let's just get that out in the open so that way we all know where we're coming from.
Oh man, that's tough, I think. Something that kind of comes to my mind is like there's a little bit, I feel like, of a difference between like things that are boring and things that are tedious. And so I guess when I think of like a state of boredom, I just think of you essentially have a period of time that is unfilled, and I guess I'm going to go with a definition that is like you choose to spend that time unwisely in a way that's unproductive. And I guess unproductive maybe is not a great word, because I don't think you always have to be doing something. But, like, you know, reading a book is a lot more productive than, like, doom scrolling or just, like, sitting in your room. I don't know, like, when I was a kid, I would just sit in my room, like, not do anything.
Yeah, that checks out.
You know?
Yeah. No offense, but, like, I could see little Brendan just sitting in his room doing nothing.
No, I was very much so the, like, black sheep in my family, because all my family members are readers. And so, like, even my sister, like, I would come into her room and I'd be like, hey, play with me, like, let's play a game. And she'd be like, no, I'm reading. And so I'd either be annoying to her, like, or I'd just go sit and lay on the carpet, you know?
You were a very imaginative kid, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And also, just for y'all to be a little bit on the inside of what I'm imagining, is I know for a fact that Brendan, when he was younger, got tonsured, which is tonsured, which is the monk haircut where they just like they have the little bald spot
on top, and then there's like a halo of hair around you.
How? Okay, I guess that's
it was a weird
story.
Catholic school thing. But
Halloween is the short answer.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that I'm just imagining you with that sitting in your room, just doing nothing and being like, I'm so bored. Yeah. But okay, that's good. What about you, Ava?
Yeah,
how would you describe boredom?
I think boredom to me is like just mass uninterest in like anything.
Ooh,
but
I actually like that.
Especially, well, I kind of cheated. Kind of looked up the definition of boredom, but that's not it. But I mean, that's where
wow,
you're
going
fired.
In that direction is like, yeah, feeling like just uninterested in whatever that sphere you're bored in.
Yeah, I think what y'all both have offered up, I kind of like and want to pick up and kind of put them together is a disinterest, is I think very boring. And I do get the sense of productivity. Like, I'm a very, like, I like to produce. I like to feel like I'm being grown or challenged or stretched or something like that. And so I feel like what you said, Brendan, is a little bit of the answer to boredom. And what you said, Ava, is like the symptom of boredom, if that makes sense. But this is a tough one to look at biblically. Like, I was really scratching my head for a while. And I think there's a lot of like low hanging fruit to just like immediately go after laziness. But laziness is a little bit different than boredom. Because laziness is just, you don't want to do anything. Boredom is like, you can't figure out what you want to do, you know? And if we were going to talk about laziness, we could have gone into Proverbs and how there's a lot of those that say that everyone should work hard. But then the problem with that is that Ecclesiastes, like 2 books later, says that everything is meaningless and that's all vanity, which is such a metal book of the Bible and one of my favorites. But then there's a bit on, or there's a lot on how we should always be working with and for God, And so that could be a quick response to boredom, right? It's like, you're bored, child? Well, you should pray, right? Or have you worshipped the Lord today? And I feel like that's a cheap answer to this question, personally. One, I think that's right. Like, I do think that you should always, like, if you're bored, like, you should challenge yourself to, like, think of God a little bit in that moment and, like, figure out what you could do with God. Because he really loves you and really enjoys spending time with you. But I'm not going to give you all that answer because I don't think that really does much more than what you've gotten from whoever else fills a pastoral role in your life. And so I sat and I realized that being bored, I feel like boredom really occurs. There's a spider right there.
New guest.
New guest on the podcast. Sorry, friends. There was a spider coming down from the ceiling, and so I had to put it safely on the carpet so it could disappear and then bite Ava later.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're not bored anymore.
No.
So,
Very on edge.
I think anxiety. Woo. I feel like when we're bored is when we're waiting. Just go ahead and pick your feet up. You're okay.
I actually like bugs. I just don't like getting bit by them.
I mean, that's fair. I like
few people do.
I like human beings, but I don't like getting bit by them. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's a safe standard. Anyway, but I feel like when boredom occurs when we're waiting, you may. I mean, if you think about like the times that you've been bored, like even when we were talking about summers, like how they can be boring. You know, in some ways, you're like kind of waiting for the summer to end, and you may be waiting with dread. You may be waiting with joy on the next school year, but like you're just kind of waiting in this like kind of middle season. Even during the school year, you know, you're if you're bored during the school year, it's because you're waiting for Christmas break or for summer break, and so boredom I think occurs when we're in the season of waiting, and something struck me very recently that made me realize that I was so bored. Like, I love my job, and like I've always enjoyed working with college students, and I've never been bored with this job. But my life, I was so bored. And this was a revelation like 3 weeks ago. So, quick story time. I was at Duke for a week. We call it an intensive week, and it was about day 3 of intensive week, and I had my social battery had just drained, and I needed to go to the room in the Airbnb that I was staying. And something that I really love is movies. I love to watch movies, and I decided that I was going to watch the first Mad Max. And the reason that I picked the first Mad Max is that following weekend the new Mad Max is going to come out, and Hannah, my wife, and I were super pumped to see that because Mad Max is freaking awesome. Anyway, I'd never seen Mad Max before. Brand new movie. Very weird movie. A lot of strange things that happen. And I realized how bored I was in life because that was the first new media that I had engaged with for maybe like 6 months. I literally had been watching the same shows, the same movies, playing the same video games, listening to the same music, reading the same books. All of it was just the same. And I like freaked out. And I had to have a come to Jesus moment with Hannah. And I just told her, I was like, I just can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot watch the same show again. And I cannot watch the same movie again. Like, I have to watch something new. I have to listen to something new. Even the food we were eating, it was the same. And I told her that. I was like, we're going to new restaurants now. I just can't do it anymore. And my life has been so much more enriched because I've been in this season of just boredom in all these weird facets, even though I've been very busy. And so boredom is this really weird thing. And I think a little bit, too, is that I was experiencing this boredom because Hannah and I are in this really challenging season of waiting with the incoming child we're going to have. My wife is expecting, and the due date is Thanksgiving Day. And we're so excited, but it's like hurry up and wait. You know what I mean? It's so boring in that sense. And so I've been thinking about how do we respond to seasons of waiting? Because boredom kind of occurs in those seasons of waiting. And the first example that I thought of was Ruth, which I brought up in another episode. But Ruth found herself in a really bad spot, and there was not many options that she could take. And instead of just kind of sitting around and hoping that God was going to do something, she got up and did something, right? She went out into the fields. She gleaned for her and for her mother-in-law. And I think that that's like just an important attitude towards waiting, is that like, if you're waiting on something, do something while you wait, right? And that's like a quick example. But the other thing is that I feel like a lot of college students, a lot of the conversations that I have with college students is that they're waiting on God for something. Usually it's waiting on God to make a calling in their lives. Like, God, I don't know if I want to be a teacher or a preacher or a singer or a psychologist or whatever it is, right? And so they've been asking God for the answer, and God hasn't given. Or they're waiting for God to move a mountain. They're waiting for God to just do something. And this is an important stage of spiritual maturity where you are presented with an opportunity to wait on God. And figuring out that response is important. And so looking at Scripture, I want us to turn to the story of Hannah in the Bible in 1 Samuel. I think she's a wonderful example of waiting on something and waiting on God. And so I'll be reading 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 through 19. And so you're welcome to read along, but this is kicking off the book of 1 Samuel, which, by the way, is one of my favorite books, and it's such a good time. So if you're looking for a good book to read, this is one. So it begins. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite, from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, and Ephraimite. Elkanah had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? And once they had finished eating and drinking at Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house, and in her deep anguish Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery, and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. And Eli thought she was drunk, and said to her, How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Eli answered, Go in peace. May the God of Israel grant what you have asked of him. She said, May your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. And this is the verse that kind of ties all together. Early the next morning, they arose and worshipped before the Lord. So, I know that was kind of a longer section of Scripture, but it paints this pretty good picture that Hannah desperately wants to be a mother. And one, I think there's like some college students that have some baby fever for one thing. Like, they just are, like, really, like, super into babies and, like, are like, oh, I can't wait to have one. And then it's like, simmer down there, Ava. And then it's like, but, like, there's a few steps before that. But Hannah desperately wants a baby, and her husband really isn't understanding her anguish. And we kind of have to read with a little bit of empathy and a little bit of context. Back then, women, I mean, if you couldn't bear children, then, like, your worth to society was questioned. And that was just super unfair to Hannah. And we even see the hostile family environment with Elkanah's other wife, right? But Hannah's been waiting on a child for a long, long time. And she is just pouring out her soul. And that's how she describes it. She's pouring out her soul, which I love that expression. And she's weeping. And she is so... she's pouring it out so much that Eli, like, thinks she's drunk. Like, he thinks that, like, she is that hammered and that wasted because she's just sprawled out on the floor weeping and calling out, right? And here's the cool thing is that Hannah's been waiting and she doesn't quite get what she wants. And the next day she gets up and worships. And kind of the question I have for y'all is, how many times have you gotten up and worship when God didn't give you what you wanted immediately?
Pretty few times.
Pretty few times, right? Because immediately we're just like, geez, God, why can't you do me solid, right?
Why have you afflicted me?
Yeah, why have you afflicted me? But Hannah's reaction was like, no, I'm going to get up and worship the Lord because that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I suppose in my answer to how should our response be to waiting is we need to worship. And we have an episode a few weeks back about how worship is a response to what God's doing. And we talked about all the different ways to worship. And so when you're bored, think about how you can worship. And if you listen to that episode, we talk about there's a lot of ways to worship. Painting, sculpting, wood carving, that's all a form of worship. But you can also take a walk. You could listen to music. You could read a book. You could study scripture. You could do whatever in response to boredom. And there's a lot of beauty in that. I believe it was Aaron Meadows. I was on a mission trip with him, and his children were present. And one of his children walked up to him, and they said, "I'm bored." And he looked back at them, and he said, "Boring people are bored." And that's stuck with me for forever because I really don't want to be a boring person. And so I've realized, and I've kind of had to have this reminder with the weird Mad Max story of like, I do need to kind of have the response of, I need to be growing. I need to be stretched. I need to be challenged in different ways. And so question for y'all is can there be a spiritual purpose in experiencing boredom?
I definitely think so. I think I'm going to kind of, I guess, backpedal a little bit on my definition of boredom. I think, like, when you are bored, you're, like, not perceiving really the world for what it is in a way. Like, I just think that being bored really brings out the best or the worst of you, you know, like with how you choose to spend that time. Because, like, when I was a kid, you know, going back to, like, you know, my family would all be reading, and I'd be like, yo, like, I want to play, but none of you guys want to play, and so they'd be like, go read a book. And I was like, dude, I do not want to read a book right now. Like, I hate you all. You know what I'm saying? And, like, it would just make me so mad. And so it's like, in my worst moments, I would just, like my sister will always tell this story about how I would ask her to play, and then I'd go to my room, and then I'd call her name over and over and over and over again. And she'd be like, what? And I'd be like, nothing. And then I'd just do it all over again. And so it's like,
you were just
so annoying.
Such a
so
child.
Annoying, dude. Yeah. So it's like, you know, that's like, you know, you can be annoying. You can choose that time to kind of use that time to, like, be a not great person or turn to things that are not great. But also, like we saw in that story, like if you like perceive your boredom as like, oh, this is a time for me to do something else, like you said, like worship or take a walk. Like something that really helps me is like just learn something. That's something that's really, really huge for me. So like this past semester, I got into like leather craft, and I like made a wallet for somebody that I liked and stuff like that. And
you didn't make me a wallet.
I didn't make you a wallet.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Continue.
Anyways, but yeah, so it's like it's kind of, and another thing too, is like, Jesus. If you think about it, him and his disciples could have been real bored out on the Sea of Galilee, walking to and from all these places, but Jesus is able to see like a mustard tree and like a mustard seed or like a vine, and he's able to like extract these really profound life lessons from these very simple things. And so I just think that like spiritually being very intentional about how we kind of channel our focus and our attention when we're bored, it can really be revealing about you as a person. Mm-hmm. And I think it is good ground to kind of stretch some of those muscles that aren't super comfortable.
So like my idea, I think, like in a spiritual purpose for boredom, I think is kind of a response to the idea that I think I've even said this, but I know I've heard other people say that sometimes God feels silent or seems silent, and maybe that makes you feel bored in your faith when you're not like having those mountaintop moments, or like you're not seeing, I guess, most miraculous of miracles that you read about in the Bible. And I think that can be a tough feeling to come to terms with. And but at the same time, I think you told me once, John, or maybe it was someone else, but I'm going to give you the credit for this.
Let's go. I'll take the credit.
That like, is God being silent, or like, are you reaching out to God? Are you getting in your Bible? Because I mean, when I'm kind of what I was saying earlier, sometimes when I'm bored in faith, it eggs me on. It makes me want to dive more in. But sometimes when I'm bored, I don't want to touch it. I want to kind of hide away from it. And I think we should not let boredom or feeling that distance from our faith hinder us. Like, don't sit in that,
Yeah.
Try to dig yourself out of that hole, because I think you can kind of just sink deeper and deeper until you really get out of some good habits. So, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I think a little bit, though, like, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's just like, God, get me out of this hole, and then God's just like, dude, I've created all of the world. like I've done everything I can for you. Let's get out of this hole together. You know what I mean? It just sometimes I think we like to despair in a weird way, but I think boredom reveals a lot about our priorities. And so what changes might we need to make to align ourselves to God? If you're going through a season of boredom, what are some things that you should do to work on that relationship, your spiritual relationship?
I think, I teach Sunday school at a local church here, and something
Dude, give them a shout out.
North Charleston United Methodist Church.
Let's go.
Shout out. But yeah, and something I'll tell my kids a lot is you can be very creative with how you spend time with God. And a lot of times we have it in our heads that it's just this you sit alone in your room and you read your Bible and then you pray, and that's kind of your only ways of spending time with God. But it's even if that was the only way that you could spend your time with God, which I don't think it is, it's go do it at the beach or in a really cool forest or like, drive up to the mountains, like, give yourself a cool setting in which to do it. But that being said, like, the Bible does call us to, like, be with God 24/7. And so a lot of times that looks like, finding regular, ordinary things to do and just, like, being like, I'm going to do this with God. And so, yeah, you can get creative, like, with journal prayer, like, prayer that's, like, written. I think there's, like, a whole bunch of things. If you can just kind of get creative with, like, how can I spend this amount of time with God, and just kind of get creative with what that looks like. And that a lot of times will overlap and coincide with what your interests are, and then you'll wind up having more fun than you expected, I think.
Yeah, you're kind of dipping your toes in our worship conversation earlier.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was actually gonna say something really similar, so I'll go in a different direction. But I think another good way to kind of shift your priorities is to be around people with their own right priorities. Like, surround yourself with people that are making time for God, or have an accountability partner, maybe. I mean, my friend and I did that when we were trying to really get into the Gospels a couple months ago. So yeah, I think sometimes your community can help you realign your priorities.
Yeah. I will definitely say this is one of the reasons why I love Lent, like when we give something up for 40 days leading up to Easter. Because and I really, really enjoy talking about that journey together. And in some sense, like, what we did with Wesley is, like, we had, like, just an open support group through Lent, where we, like, always ask the question, like, how's that going? And so an accountability partner is good. I am always happy to be that person in a student's life of just being like, okay, I'm going to challenge you now. Like, Ava, you go read the book of Mark, write every question you have down, and then we're going to grab coffee and we're going to try to wrestle with these things, right? Mm-hmm. But finding that accountability partner is good. But, when we talk about boredom, we talk about changing things up. But I also think there's great value in finding routine. And so, with Wesley, we meet the same times every week, which that's good to find that rhythm. And so, in some sense, I would encourage you to find a rhythm. But one of the things that, Brendan, you said that you were the outreach intern, which, you're supposed to be, like, making sure that everyone's having fun and stuff like that. But really, one of the things that we're very hyper aware of at the beginning of the school year is kind of combating boredom. We kind of talked about how freshman year can be a very boring experience or a very lonesome experience. Homesickness is a big factor in that too. Could as a way to kind of wrap this discussion up, what are some ways that Wesley has helped you with boredom? Whether that's like a specific event that you can think of, or how has that assisted you in your college journey?
Yeah, I think community is huge. You talked about, like, accountability, which obviously comes through community and stuff like that. And yeah, like, for me, despite walking in my very first time to Wesley and, like, John called me an axe murderer, or
They didn't
like,
call you. I questioned if you were one.
Okay, all right.
So there's a difference.
Fair. But regardless, it's like, these were people that were welcoming, and, like, they would invite me to hang out at the student space, or we would, go to do various different things and serve together and things like that. So community is huge, like getting plugged in with a church or something like Wesley or college ministry campus ministry thing is always great. And yeah, for me, that was really just awesome. It gave me things to do. It gave me people to do things with. Like, just recently, I had a period of, like, I did a whole bunch of traveling, and I had like basically 24 hours where I just had to unpack, do laundry, repack, and then go back on my way. And there were like a handful of people in town, and so we all just went and got dinner. And it's like, I probably would have been kind of bored because, again, it's one of those periods where you're kind of waiting for something to happen. But you can't really speed that process up when you're by yourself. So, yeah, Wesley has just been, like, super great with giving me a community that's challenging me and just, like, giving me things yet to do with others, I think.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Ava? Has Wesley helped you with boredom in Charleston?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I already touched on the social aspect. I think now in multiple episodes that was like a rough patch when I first came to college. But more specifically, I wanted to touch on like Wesley helping me with my musical boredom and my worship boredom. Because another thing when you get to college a lot of times is you'll go around to different churches and try and find your home church and your home away from home. And like I would go to a couple, but one thing I remember every time was just this kind of like just really sad feeling of like missing getting to really take a leadership role and getting to sing and be part of a band community, like a smaller group within a church. And I think when I joined the Wesley Praise team, that helped me with like not only musical boredom, because I just didn't have any like musical classes or anything, but it also helped me find my own little like passion. Like it's fun to find people. Obviously, we were all passionate about God and Christianity, but it was also it's fun to be in an even smaller group of people that's like really passionate about music and using that as a form of worship. And yeah.
Last question, I promise. In response to boredom, usually some people would just be like, well, go do something fun. So what's one of the, like a good memory of having a lot of fun with Wesley? Like what was a really fun thing we've done together?
Man. Ava, do you want to go? Do you have something?
This is, yeah, I'll try. There are a lot of fun memories. That is
clarification. She is struggling to pick one.
I will say I absolutely love PowerPoint nights.
Dude, I was actually about to say the same thing, actually.
I forgot about those.
Yeah.
I didn't think about those at all.
For those of you that don't know what those are, it's kind of like, normally we think of PowerPoints with school presentations and stuff, but a lot of young people will get together in their friend groups and just make fun PowerPoints. So you can do whatever you want,
Yeah.
And I think I asked Wesley if we could do one, and I was a little bit surprised y'all said yes. Because at the time I was like, man, I'm just a measly freshman. I don't know if they're going to do what I want.
We only listen to those who are sophomores or older.
No, but yeah, I not only felt heard, I guess, in my desire for a PowerPoint night, but it was just like everyone actually like stepped up and like did.
Yeah, that was a really good set of PowerPoints.
So,
People
honestly,
did well.
Yeah.
Not being afraid to like ask people to do fun things,
Yeah.
it was a nice learning moment for me. So yeah, I think that's my moment.
Yeah, that was actually exactly what I was thinking of, but I have another one. But PowerPoint night was a really good time as well. River Dogs games are a thing here.
Oh, yeah.
And, so every once in a while, like usually once a year, we'll go out to the River Dogs game.
That's
which
the
is
minor
baseball.
league baseball, yeah.
And I have been known to, like, kind of just, I don't know, be like the annoying dad in the stands, like yelling.
No, you're just mean.
Well, that kind of is that's like what makes the dad annoying, is he doesn't know like anything about the sport, and he's just kind of providing unhelpful like banter, and that's kind of just like how I exist at River Dogs games.
Yeah.
But like,
those are fun.
But yeah, those are just a lot of fun because I mean, yeah, like baseball's there, but it's also just like fun talking to people.
And ballpark food.
Ballpark food. Yeah, just like the vibes too, and it's just really pretty, and It's a good time.
Yeah, we'll do that at the start of next school year, probably again. But
Yeah.
I would say for me, something that I always have a lot of fun with is the thumb war that we do at the retreats. And we got to just give credit where credit's due. Jaden Scott, who is going to be the Citadel president next year, he is freakishly good at thumb wars. And he won in the fall retreat. And then when we went for the spring retreat, that's where all the other Wesley Foundations come. And I brought up how we had to do another thumb war because we had to have someone beat Jaden. And Jaden beat everyone at the spring retreat. And then we found out his hand was broken when he beat everyone. So he is like actually just a thumb war machine. But it is a lot of fun to see how everyone gets up in arms about that. So
Michael Jordan flu game. Jaden Scott, technically state champion, I guess.
Yeah, he's the state champion. We're gonna get a ribbon, I think. But that's all good stuff. Y'all have anything else on boredom?
No, I think with that, my friends, we know what's up with boredom. And if you guys have any questions, you can definitely reach out to us at our email at wuw@wesleychs.org. And also don't forget to, follow or like whatever platform you're listening to us on. That would be much appreciated.
And if you want to learn more about the Charleston Wesley Foundation, you can go to our website, which is wesleychs.org, or you can check us out on Instagram and Facebook and see what we're up to that week. But I'm gonna offer a prayer. God, we thank you for this opportunity to talk about kind of a boring topic, which is boredom. We kind of sit with it. We don't really know how to describe it, but we all know what it is, and we just are hopeful that we've added some definition to it, we've added some solutions to it, and that we've also made some connections to you and your will and your way. Help us to reflect on these things in our week, and just help us to find ways to glorify you throughout that week. As in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for listening, and you'll catch us next week.